Blessed Day Reflection by Abijah listeners. My name is Abijah Grant, and we are here to reflect on our life journey. We will be discussing topics related to self-awareness, self-improvement, and mental health. Also, the purpose of this safe space is for us to be free to discuss the ups and downs, celebrate the wins, and talk about ways to improve the lows. So welcome to this podcast, and I hope you gain something from this time we share together.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing? It is your girl, Abijah Grant. Welcome back to another episode of Reflection by Abijah. I hope that you guys are doing well and that you are having a blessed day. I feel like it's been freaking forever since I've talked to you guys. So I am so sorry that I missed last week's episode. I have been recovering from a really bad cold, which basically took me out of commission for about 4 days. And if you have listened to the podcast episode before, I've explained to you guys that I normally record on a Friday. I think I got sick on a Thursday all the way into this past Monday. So I couldn't record an episode because I couldn't. Um, I just felt like I wanted to show up with, I guess you would say, the best mindset. And I knew that I just was not in a place to do an episode for you guys. So I wanted to apologize for that I tried not to miss a recording, but also at the same time, life is what it is and we have to take care of our health. So it's very important that I focus on that. But I did miss you guys, and thank you if you are here today listening to this new episode. I was thinking about putting on like a episode that I've put on prior or recorded prior, but I was like, I'd rather just not put anything out and show up next week with a new episode. That is just what I prefer to do. So that's the whole spiel. So you know exactly what happened last week, but we are doing much better. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this week's podcast episode. This episode, I wanted to the podcast is going, I want to say, in a more developed, more me being free to discuss about my journey, more just being very raw and not being fearful of having certain conversations, because I think we don't want to have certain, sometimes, let me speak about myself, we don't want to have certain conversations because we're afraid that people may look at us in a certain way. Society tries to act like things don't necessarily exist. And I just want to let you guys know that this podcast will be going in a very raw and what's going on in my life kind of route. So just buckle up and understand that future episodes, this episode and future episodes will be going in that direction. All right. So in this episode, I wanted to talk about balancing mental illness and empathy. And obviously, we know that it is so hard to balance mental illness and manage it. I've talked about that so many times in episodes. But one of the things when I was having a discussion with someone, we were talking about how that the empathy side of things, how do we balance the empathy side of things? And when I say empathy, it's that I feel people who deal with mental illness, that's just my personal opinion, they have a lot of emotions. Okay? And when you have a lot of those emotions, sometimes I feel like you have that ability to connect to people. I know that I've been told that I'm a good listener and that I try to give good advice. And I feel like my mental illness and my emotional side of my mental illness puts me into that space of having those conversations because I know what the person is going through. You see what I'm saying? So being empathetic has, I guess, it has backfired in my life because sometimes I am too empathetic. And then the person is coming to me or wanting to have conversations with me, but that is all I am there for. It's for them to have those conversations with me. Um, and it has been hard to want to connect with someone, but not necessarily be their problem solver all the time. But at the same time, I also feel like that I enjoy helping people. I enjoy communicating with people. And I'm not saying that every single person that I interact with is wanting to, want me to help them through. I'm just saying that it has happened more than once. And sometimes I also feel like I open up that door. It's like they just know, people just know that this is a quality of mine. And to be honest with you, it's a personal thing as well because, again, of my emotional side of me. I I struggle with being there but not being there too much. You see what I'm saying? And I wanted to talk about that in this episode. I wanted to explore boundaries because when I was talking to this individual, we were speaking about past friendships and how that, you know, trying to make friends with people can be difficult when you are being the emotional friend who's always there for your other, the person that is your friend. And how that is just it's a balance. You see what I'm saying? Like it's it's a very difficult balance. So in this episode, I wanted to basically explore. I have here 4 bullet points that I am trying to implement. I'm not saying that I got it right. I am currently in the process of trying to make more friends. And I believe I spoke to you guys about that before. Um, and open up and be vulnerable and get to know some people because I think in my past I have, in some sense, avoided making friends for the comfort that I don't have to deal with people and what's going on with them. It's like I have my own problems. I don't want your problems too. That's my thought, or that was my thinking in the past. But then at the flip side, I'm like, I don't have any friends. I don't have anybody to connect with. I don't have anybody to have shared experiences with. And if I want to connect to someone, I'm going to have to put myself out there. So it's kind of like you can't ask for to be left alone, but then you want to be bothered sometimes. It's just that it doesn't work that way. So let's go ahead and get into the housekeeping rules before we get into some of the bullet points. If you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, be sure to hit the follow and notification button so Spotify lets you know when I release a new episode. As well, leave me a comment on what you enjoy about the podcast and give me a 5-star rating. This is how you can support my podcast. And the disclaimer is I am not a licensed psychiatrist or therapist. My suggestions and my guests are based on general knowledge and life experiences. If you're considering making significant changes or dealing with personal issues, seek and talk to a licensed mental health professional. All right, so let's go ahead and get into these bullet points that I'm trying to introduce in my life that is going to allow me to set boundaries. Well, going to allow me to be there for people, but at the same time set boundaries. So the first one is using empathy as an asset and not a liability. So basically, this means encouraging those that you may come to you for guidance, being that person that's behind the individual, giving them guidance, but you're focusing on giving them helpful tools rather than solving their problem. So what would normally happen in the past is that when people would come to me for their problems, I'm telling them you should do this, you should do that. Say for instance, they're with a partner who is not good to them. Well, you need to leave this partner because they're not treating you well, or this is the things that they're doing to you, or whatever it could be. It's pretty much telling them what to do. So what I need to recognize is that it's not my responsibility to tell them. If I'm choosing to be friends with them, I'm choosing to be there and support them. However, I can approach a situation saying, with this person, this relationship that's not working out for whatever reasons, how do you feel? What do you want to do? After they've said all they need to say, what do you think your outcome should be? And try to allow for them to gather their own solution. And the helpful tool is allowing for that person to be a support, but allowing them to figure it out. Because at the end of the day, a lot of times people know what they need to do. They just choose not to do it because it's hard to leave a relationship, or it's hard to make a decision about whatever you need to make a decision about. And I'm not saying that this is a tool that I'm going to use in every single situation. I'm saying for the ones that it applies to, that I can use this. I don't want to be a liability towards why you chose to make an outcome. I want it to be because you're choosing to make that outcome or make that decision. So the next one that I have here is balancing empathy objectively. And simply put, that means showing you care by listening and supporting, but you're also setting boundaries by treating the situation fairly without allowing personal feelings to influence your judgment. So, you guys know that I have been through difficult relationship. Um, and one of the things that I can say, every situation doesn't apply to the situation that you're in. And just because I was with someone who didn't treat me well or was doing X, Y, and Z doesn't necessarily mean that the individual who's coming to me with their problems, that their partner is doing the same thing. Or they are in a certain environment work wise, or and the people around them, I've been in different or difficult work places. Doesn't necessarily mean that when a person or friend comes to me and says, hey, I'm dealing with this situation at my job, means that, oh, they're dealing with the same thing that I dealt with. Is it possible? Yes. But at the same time, it's very important to support that person objectively without getting your feelings involved. That's what I'm trying to get to. Because when you interject your feelings, you now take on that burden of whatever is going on with that individual. And the fact of the matter is that is not what you're trying to do. You're not trying to take on somebody else's problems. However, when you suffer from mental illness and emotional feelings like me, you tend to take on the burdens of others because of your empathy. But your empathy is coming from your emotional. Let me correct that, because empathy could be in different ways. Because I know when I was doing my research, they were saying that you could be empathetic to animals, you could be empathetic to the environment. For me, I'm empathetic towards other people. I take on the energies of other people, whether it's good or bad. So I have to, unfortunately, isolate those feelings to a certain level that it doesn't trickle in when it's time to be there for my friend. I have to be objective about the situation. I can't react due to something that's happened in my past and try to put it into their situation, because that's typically what happens. That's the reason why I keep saying that.
Let's go ahead and take a quick break. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into Reflection by Abijah. Feel free to check out the podcast Facebook and Instagram page. The links will be available in the show notes. Let's get back to the podcast.
So the next bullet point that I have is recognize your limits. If you allow it, some people will come to you for everything because they have become dependent on you and they know that you have the answer. The fact is that you should not compromise your well-being. Sometimes you may have to tell a person, there is nothing I could do for you at this time. It doesn't mean that you don't care. It just means you can't give what you don't have. I have dealt with this heavily, I said heavily in my past. Of a person is coming to me for everything. everything that they're going through. I think I even dealt with this in my teens, now that I think about it, with a friendship that I had, where I was friends with someone who was being abused by their boyfriend. And although I've never been physically abused, I've been mentally abused, but that was later on down the road. I just say that all to say that you you're there for the people that you care about. However, their problem is not your problem. And I know that that sounds pretty messed up. However, if you allow for their problem to become your problem, you would suffer. And you have to think about what is best for you. Because at the end of the day, that person's life, they have to figure out what they need in order to resolve whatever is going on. Because at the end of the day, regardless of whether you were there or not, they got to figure it out. So, in that sense, it's like you have to think about your well being. You should not be compromising your feelings about the situation, trying to be that rock or support or listening ear for somebody who may be dealing with tough situations. And I know I'm focusing on the negative, and it just is what it is. I mean, obviously, like I told you before, there could be positive empathy, but this is a topic about negative empathy or negative situations, and having to be empathetic about the situation that someone close to you is going through, and balancing those emotions. Okay. So like I said before, sometimes there's nothing that you can do at this time. You got to leave it up to that person to figure it out. Okay. Because it's too much. And there's been many times in my life that it's been too much. And I start to feel like it's a part of me, it's body in me. I feel my stress levels go up. I feel every time that the phone rings and this person calls me, they're gonna call me with something crazy, and I'm just like, I can't, you know. And it does hurt. I'm not saying like I'm some mean-spirited individual and I'm just like, screw you. I want to help the person, but I just know that I can't. I just can't, because it's too much. So we have to recognize our limits on what we can give in a situation. So the last bullet point that I have is recognize when you are triggered. Showing compassion to others can bring up things you haven't resolved in your journey. It's important to heal yourself first. Trying to encourage others in an unbalanced place can possibly lead to incorrect advice. So I feel like this is very important. What someone is going through can easily trigger you. I have had conversations with people, and they explained to me about how they've dealt with a partner who was abusive, and it does trigger my time when I was with someone who pained me and hurt me so much to the core that I just couldn't fathom that a person would do this to me. And speaking with somebody who has suffered with the I don't know if it was physical, but the emotional. I may have said physical before. I'm not 100% sure, but the emotional turmoil put me in a place like, yo, are you bugging? And after guiding that person through, I started to think about what happened to me. And I'm just like, I got angry all over again. And that's when I had to take a step back in my journey and say, Abia, what is it that you haven't resolved about this situation? And it was difficult. It was hard to come to the realization that I never forgave this person for how they treated me. And I needed to forgive them because they were taking a part of my world. Like they existed in my current world where they shouldn't exist anymore because I'm no longer with this individual anymore. So why am I allowing for them to have a place? But I was giving them a place because I never forgave. And I realized I never forgave when I was having a conversation with someone about what they were going through. So in that space of trying to help somebody, you may get triggered. And that's something that you have to, I guess, consider as a possibility of that happening. So I just, like I said, I wanted to have this discussion because I feel like it's so important on our mental journey. Mental illness doesn't end just because I've mentioned this before. It doesn't end just because things are good. It's mental situations and feelings and all the stuff. It's a constant working progress. So, in conclusion, I feel that it is important for us to recognize that taking care of others is not our responsibility. And like I said, I know that sounds screwed up, but it's the truth. It's a choice. You have a choice of whether you want to be there to guide somebody through or not. I say that because I don't want people to feel like they're obligated. Sometimes you just can't be there, and it's nothing wrong with that. And when you recognize that, it's like, I'm trying to think about how I feel. You just know that you're protecting yourself. You have to protect yourself. But at the same time, if you're making a choice and you're willing to give towards someone who needs or wants, let me correct myself, wants advice and they want a listening ear, that you make a point to remain steady within, and if you ever feel like you're not steady within and you're starting to resent the person, because I feel like that's kind of the stage where I didn't want to be bothered picking up the phone, and maybe you're going to have to cut that friendship to a minimum, or maybe no friendship at all. I'm speaking more about friendships than family members or partners. I'm speaking about friendships because in the next, I think, episode, I've already started jotting down some notes. We're going to be talking about friendships, and I know it doesn't necessarily relate to mental health, um, but I want to talk about it because we're trying to self-improve over here. We're trying to be better. So we're going to talk about it. But I hope that something that I said in this episode was helpful if you are dealing with a friendship that is a lot, that may be one or two or three or four, all of them that I've discussed here, you can potentially apply. And I really hope that it helps. And like I mentioned before, your well-being is the top priority. So be selfish and think about yourself first before you think about others. And being selfish and taking care of yourself is not wrong, because you can't be there for other people if you don't take care of you. Right? I know I feel like I'm right in that situation, or in those thoughts. So guys, that is the end of this week's episode. Again, I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. Stay blessed out there in those streets, and make sure that you treat others kindly out there in those streets. And God willing, I will talk to you guys in the next podcast episode.
Thank you for listening to Reflection by Abijah. Let me know in the comments section what you thought about today's episode, and share the podcast with your friends and family. The link will be available in the show notes.